In the final weeks of 2025, Japan made a move almost no one noticed. No announcements, no grand speeches, no headlines declaring a new era. Yet in Tokyo's ministries, in confidential briefings and discreet diplomatic corridors, a quiet shift began to take shape. It was not a defense pact, nor a trade agreement, nor a minerals treaty in the traditional sense. It was something bigger and far more strategic, a multi-billion realignment of Japan's industrial future toward a single partner Japan trusts more than almost any other nation on Earth. And this time, the decision came with global consequences. Because while much of the world focused on great power rivalries, Japan quietly placed its future in the hands of Canada, reshaping the balance of economic power in ways that China did not anticipate. Today, we uncover how this pact emerged, why it matters, and why the world's third-largest economy picked Canada for one of the most important strategic decisions of the decade. Welcome to GEOCAPITALIST, the channel where we decode how quiet decisions, discreet diplomacy, and multi-billion-dollar strategies reshape the world around us. Your response to our recent video has been extraordinary, especially as we explore how democracies are building new alliances for a more stable, less volatile global economy. Today, we follow a story few analysts have fully grasped. Why Japan, a nation defined by precision and long-term planning, chose Canada for a pact that could redefine supply chains, technology, and industrial security for the next decade. If you enjoy fact-based geopolitical videos, make sure you subscribe, because the world is shifting fast and understanding these moves is becoming more essential than ever. Now let's begin. Japan did not announce this pact. It never used the language of treaties or alliances, nor did it frame it as a historic event. Instead, signs emerged quietly through redirected investments, new research collaborations, expanded energy dialogues, and unusually frequent diplomatic exchanges with Ottawa. Analysts first noticed the shift when Japanese firms began coordinating directly with Canadian agencies on hydrogen infrastructure, semiconductor materials, and clean energy components that Japan considers foundational for its next industrial chapter. The pattern became clearer as Tokyo restructured parts of its economic security strategy, placing Canada at the center of critical sectors once dominated by other suppliers. None of this arrived as a single announcement. Rather, it emerged as a constellation of moves, each small in isolation but transformative in combination. Japan was not searching for publicity, it was searching for resilience. And in a world where supply chains are fragile and geopolitical shocks can halt entire industries overnight, Tokyo understood a fundamental truth. The most powerful deals are often the ones made quietly. Japan's multi-billion pivot toward Canada revealed itself not through words, but through consistent, deliberate actions that signaled a deep trust forming beneath the surface. Japan's economy is built on precision, reliability, and uninterrupted industrial flow. For decades, these qualities depended on supply chains that stretched across regions marked by political tension, export controls, and unpredictable strategic shifts. Japan could no longer afford to anchor its future to systems vulnerable to sudden disruptions, especially in sectors like clean energy, semiconductors, advanced batteries, and hydrogen technologies. The world had entered a decade where volatility became constant, and Japan's planners recognized that economic security would determine national strength more than military posture. Canada offered what Japan needed at this exact moment: a stable, democratic partner with transparent governance, clean energy capacity, and a commitment to long-term industrial cooperation. But beyond resources or technology, Japan saw in Canada something deeper: predictability. While other regions navigated internal upheavals and geopolitical confrontation, Canada projected steadiness. That steadiness became a strategic asset. Japan understood that the future of manufacturing requires more than materials. It requires partners whose intentions remain consistent through shifting global currents. In 2025, as industries modernized and old power structures cracked, Canada emerged not as an alternative, but as the solution Japan had been quietly preparing to rely on. Japan's choice was not improvisation. It was the result of watching Canada evolve into one of the world's most trusted anchors for clean industry and responsible energy. Canada's strength was not only geological, nor was it limited to its mineral base or vast natural resources. Its real leverage came from governance, transparent institutions, environmental accountability, indigenous partnerships, and a stable regulatory environment that allowed long-term industrial planning without fear of abrupt reversals. Japanese executives increasingly viewed Canada as the safest place within the G7 to build multi-decade strategies, especially as demand for ethical, low-carbon production surged. Canada's clean LNG corridors, hydro-powered processing hubs, and emerging hydrogen networks offered Japan something it could not obtain elsewhere at scale: energy security grounded in climate responsibility. Mark Carney's global influence reinforced this perception, positioning Canada as a country not just with resources but with credibility. Japanese policymakers began referring to Canada not as a supplier, but as a stabilizing force in a turbulent era. As democratic nations searched for dependable partners, Canada's reputation shifted from supportive to strategic. For Japan, this trust became the foundation of a multi-billion pact designed not to impress the world, but to secure its industrial future. China did not anticipate Japan's pivot, because for decades, Japan's industrial lifelines were deeply integrated with Chinese processing and export flows. The assumption in Beijing was simple: Japan needed China more than China needed Japan. Yet Japan's planners noticed a vulnerability forming. As China accelerated its internal high-tech expansion and tightened strategic control over key materials, Japan saw the risk of being downstream from another nation's priorities. The shift toward Canada signaled something Beijing did not fully expect. Japan was willing to restructure entire sectors of its economy to reduce exposure to geopolitical leverage. What surprised China was not the diversification itself, but the depth of trust Japan placed in Canada. This trust was rooted in governance and long-term alignment, qualities China could not replicate. Japan's move suggested that the global race for industrial security would be shaped less by dominance and more by reliability. In this new landscape, Canada offered certainty where China offered scale, and Japan chose certainty. Beijing understood the implications quickly. Supply chains anchored in democratic cooperation could weaken its influence over regional manufacturing. Japan had quietly rebalanced the equation, and China found itself observing a shift it had not expected to unfold so decisively. The negotiations behind Japan's multi-billion pact with Canada did not resemble traditional trade discussions. There were no sweeping public frameworks, no summit announcements, and no political theatrics. Instead, the pact emerged through a sequence of technical dialogues, strategic industry consultations, and private evaluations of long-term compatibility. Japanese delegations visited Canadian energy hubs, research institutes, and clean processing facilities, often without press, meeting with specialists rather than politicians. The discussions focused on integration rather than transaction, examining how hydrogen networks, semiconductor supply lines, LNG corridors, and next-generation battery systems could operate seamlessly across both nations. Canadian agencies reciprocated with quiet diplomatic outreach, emphasizing transparency, climate competitiveness, and the predictability Japanese firms value. Over time, a pattern became unmistakable. Both countries viewed the partnership not as a deal, but as an architecture. By 2025, investments, research exchanges, and infrastructural alignments had accumulated into a cohesive multi-billion framework. It was never announced as a single moment because it was never meant to be one. It was built layer by layer, decision by decision, forming a strategic structure designed to endure. The Pact's power lies in its subtlety. Japan and Canada constructed something far more durable than a headline. They built a system. Beijing did not respond with public statements or confrontational rhetoric. Instead, analysts observed a subtle recalibration as China assessed the implications of Japan's new alignment. The concern was not the partnership itself, but the precedent it represented. If Japan, a major industrial power deeply integrated with Chinese supply chains, could reorient part of its strategic future toward Canada, then other countries might follow. China's policymakers recognized that the Pact challenged an assumption long taken for granted, that global manufacturing would inevitably remain intertwined with Chinese processing dominance. Japan's shift introduced a new variable: democratic supply chain ecosystems capable of supporting large-scale industry without Chinese intermediaries. Beijing quietly evaluated how this could affect pricing power, export influence, and regional strategic leverage. The move did not threaten China directly, but it signaled an emerging diversification trend that could, over time, erode aspects of its industrial reach. Japan had acted early, decisively, and without publicity. China found itself observing a partner it once considered structurally dependent, choosing autonomy instead. This subtle shift carried implications far beyond minerals or energy. It suggested that trust, stability, and long-term alignment were becoming the new currencies of global economic security, currencies China could not always match. The Pact's influence expanded far beyond the bilateral relationship. As Japan and Canada deepened coordination across energy, technology, and industrial infrastructure, other democracies began reassessing their own strategic dependencies. The world had entered a phase where industrial resilience mattered as much as competitiveness, and the Japan-Canada alignment offered a blueprint for stability. European policymakers noted the collaboration's emphasis on clean energy integration and ethical supply chains, while India observed its potential for semiconductor cooperation and hydrogen partnerships. Australia, already a long-term partner to Japan, interpreted the Pact as part of a broader democratic convergence reshaping global manufacturing. The importance of the Pact was not its secrecy or scale, but its model. Two nations constructing a predictable framework capable of resisting geopolitical turbulence. In an era defined by volatility, this predictability became a powerful asset. The partnership subtly shifted expectations about where innovation would emerge and how nations would secure essential inputs for green technologies, data infrastructure, and advanced manufacturing. Japan and Canada demonstrated that resilience could be engineered through cooperation rather than confrontation. As more countries recognized the value of democratized industrial networks, the Pact began influencing strategic planning across continents. By the end of 2025, analysts began describing a quiet transformation underway in the global economy. The Japan-Canada partnership represented more than a bilateral adjustment. It marked the rise of a new economic architecture shaped by democracies seeking stability in a fractured world. This architecture did not rely on dominance or coercion, but on trust, transparency, and long-term planning. Japan now had access to a reliable foundation for its next industrial chapter, from hydrogen corridors to semiconductor materials to clean-powered manufacturing inputs. Canada, in turn, strengthened its position as a global anchor for responsible energy and technology supply, elevating its influence within the G7 and expanding its role in emerging markets. The broader world began adapting to this shift. Nations observed how decentralized, democratic industrial blocs could reduce vulnerabilities that once defined global trade. The pact hinted at a future where countries choose partners not only for price or scale, but for governance quality and strategic alignment. In this emerging landscape, Japan and Canada position themselves not merely as participants, but as architects. Their pact becomes a reference point for nations seeking resilience. And as the decade unfolds, its impact will echo across supply chains, energy networks, and the balance of economic power. And there you have it, how Japan's multi-billion pact with Canada just blindsided China. If today's story brought clarity, I invite you to join us for the next video, because every week, new alliances reshape the world quietly but decisively. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps this channel continue bringing fact-based geopolitical videos to a fast-moving world. Thank you for watching, for your comments, and for being part of this community. See you in the next video.